What's going on, Junkie Nation? Gorgeous George and Goes are back with another superstar from the sport of mixed martial arts. It's former UFC middleweight champion Rich Franklin, who now is a one championship VP. We're going to talk about 1X, which takes place on Saturday. That's right, Saturday, not Friday. And boy, do they have a stacked card. I think I see 18 combat events of grappling, MMA, Muay Thai and MMA. It's incredible, Rich, what they've done for this 1X card. And I can't wait to dive into it with you. Folks, it starts at 1 a.m. Eastern Saturday. So that's 10 p.m. Pacific Friday. Don't get confused, though. That's just the early fights as you get to the main card, 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, 5 p.m. Pacific Saturday morning. I will definitely be up. Title fights, everything you can think of. You guys came strong on this one, Rich.
Yeah, I'll tell you. You talk about the fight starting at 1 a.m. It's 1 a.m. on Friday night, technically Saturday morning, and those are the early fights. But this whole card of 1X, top to bottom, like part 1, 2, and 3, has some amazing fights the whole time. It's not like one of those shows where you just got to sit through a bunch of fights and wait for the main event. Just in part 1, we have Renier de Ridder versus Andre Galvao in the grappling match.
Yeah.
Man, and I'm really excited to see this match. I've never been on the mat with Renier, but I have with Andre Galvao, and let me just say that was an eye-opening experience for me, learning that there is a completely different level to jiu-jitsu. And so I always think of a guy like Renier as someone who has amazing jiu-jitsu, but within the realm of mixed martial arts. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with like him and Andre Galvao. But all that is to say that this card from top to bottom is a pretty damn stacked card, man.
Yeah, de Ridder's a multi-level champ. And when I was scrolling down, I was like, what? He's on the card? And then I noticed it was grappling. But then I saw the opposition, and I've seen de Ridder and the work that he's done. So, yeah, you're talking about, I guess, the high level, in submission grappling versus a guy that's high level in MMA, but has triumphed with it. So, it's interesting. It's interesting to see how this thing goes down.
Yeah.
And then I noticed Nikki Holtzen, who's a clinical, decorated kickboxer. Also, he's going to be kickboxing. So we haven't even gotten to the top, but boy, are they spoiling us early.
Dude, I mean, well, I'm sure everybody's been talking about, obviously, the DJ Raw Tang matchup, which is this hybrid match. And just to take a step back on that, One Championship, when they started doing Muay Thai and the Super Series kickboxing matches, when they started adding those to the cards, I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan when we started talking about it internally in the company. And my whole idea was like, who comes to a football game to watch an inning of baseball? Kind of like that mentality. And I'm showing up at an MMA event to watch MMA. I don't want to see any Muay Thai. And then we did our first event, and I kind of begrudgingly internally was like, I actually liked this, and I don't want to like it because I'm a Muay Thai guy or because I'm an MMA guy. And then as the cards went on, I started really looking forward to a lot of the Muay Thai and kickboxing matchups. And then, of course, we've had a few like super grappling matches, and this one coming up, like we just talked about with RDR and Galvao. But I like this concept that we have with the various martial arts that are in there, and it kind of, for me, brings me back to the original concept of MMA when it was like, boxing versus jiu-jitsu or wrestling versus judo or whatever. And so now this is kind of changed, and we have this hybrid match with Demetrius Johnson and Rodtang, and that's going to be pretty cool. And for the listeners out there that don't know the rules of this match, it's 1 round of Muay Thai, strict Muay Thai. We do our Muay Thai with 4-ounce gloves, then 1 round of MMA, then 1 round of Muay Thai, and then 1 round of MMA. So it's going to be interesting to see how that particular match unfolds. I haven't had a chance to talk to DJ, so I don't know strategically like what he's thinking about in that first round, if he's going to test his skill at Muay Thai or kind of wade the storm and take him into the second round.
Yeah, and by the way, I do want to talk about DJ and Rodtang, but if you want to see multi-sports in one event, you should go to the fights. Every once in a while, a hockey game breaks out. But anyway, yeah, we were trying to pin DJ to the wall, proverbially, and trying to get answers from him. Are you going to stall? Are you going to be over-aggressive and take him out of his game? Because as you know, Muay Thai fighters start off a little bit slow, and they grow into their comfort as the Muay Thai fight takes place.
Yeah.
What do you have? What kind of tricks do you have up your sleeve? And he would kind of give us a little bit of both. I may do both, and that's probably the smart thing to say. He wants to be unpredictable. But one thing he convinced us of is, man, I really don't care about the result. I want to have fun, and I want to go at it. And sometimes I really do throw the game plan out the window.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that I've seen DJ had said in previous interviews, like, fighting for one championship, like this organization, outside of this organization, he probably would have never had an opportunity to do a fun match like this. And so that's one of the things that, he's really looking forward to for this match.
Would you have ever been convinced to do something like this in your heyday?
Absolutely, I would have. And when keep in mind when I got into martial arts, like I started off in the traditional karate, and then obviously I graduated the same year as the first UFC, and so like many people who watched Hoyt in that first match, it was like I was sitting there watching, and I'd never done any grappling, and I'm like, come on, man, just stand up. Like it was that easy to me, and so those early days of one style versus another style is very appealing to me. So that's why something like this, like I would have given this a try for sure.
Rich, why aren't you on this card, by the way? With the resurgence of veterans dipping their toes back into combat sports of some sort, were you ever approached? And I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy of a question. You're always in great shape, and no one's ever calling you fatso.
Yeah, no. I mean, you can watch my training footage, the stuff that I post, and obviously, listen. When we're done with this interview, I'm going to pack up my gear and head to my second training session for the day. So, with that being said, I keep myself in tip-top shape. But I don't know if I don't. It's kind of weird. I'm a VP for the company and like competing for the company. I don't know if there's a conflict of interest there or not. But no, they didn't approach me to compete on this card.
Rich, jumping back over to DJ there for a second, like George mentioned, we kind of grilled him on all the different scenarios, and within our world, when we're trying to break down these fights, after a while, I start to realize there's so many scenarios that could it be possible that maybe fighters just overthink it at this point? Like, have you ever gotten to that point in your career where you just hit the strategy so hard that you go, wait a minute, this is actually taking me out of my head instead of putting me in the moment?
Yeah, well, okay, so one of the things that I came to dislike about competing professionally is that when I got into martial arts, the pursuit of excellence is what things were about. Just, making my technique better. For example, today I went in, I did some grappling today, and we're working these De La Riva back takes. This is not the way my body moves. So when I'm in this class, like it's almost like I'm learning techniques at a beginner level again, because I just don't move this way. And I like challenging my brain because it makes it, I'm a purist in the sense that I just want to make myself a better version of me today than I was yesterday, And so when I started competing professionally, what ends up happening is that instead of actually just worrying about becoming a better martial artist, you're training specifically for an opponent. So, you train for one opponent who maybe they're a wrestler and they shoot, like they're a shooter, they doubles and singles. And so you have to work a specific takedown defense. And then if you're training against a different kind of wrestler, they're more of a Greco-Roman stylist. And so you're training a completely different kind of defense. And so that's one of the things that I came to dislike about the careers, because you just start like focusing on what you need to get focused on. And I do believe that athletes can overthink fights. Like they can overthink their strategy. I'm probably one of them. I'm an overthinker. That's both probably my greatest strength and my Achilles heel simultaneously. But what my camp would do is we would typically set up like a almost like a matrix, like my strengths and weaknesses versus my opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and kind of see like how we match up, and essentially like the path of least resistance to victory is the way that we would do things. And but in the end, like you need to kind of work your entire game in case plan A kind of goes out the window. And I recently posted like my Travis Luter fight, a little clip from that, and that was clearly not plan A, being mounted and having to escape that armbar.
Rich, I want to ask you about Akiyama and Aoki. But I want to reference another fight first. Colby Covington and Jorge Mazuro. They fought for 25 minutes, big rivalry. Fight's over, but the fight's continuing on the streets of Miami. This is another heated rivalry, right? With Aoki and Akiyama. These guys do not like each other.
No.
At the end of this fight, do you feel like maybe a handshake, or does it feel like this is just something these two guys just don't like each other?
You know what? Listen, you never know what you're going to get from Shinya. And if Shinya does end up submitting Akiyama, I could see him like, I don't know, slapping Akiyama in the face or something when he's laying there unconscious. Like, I think that's the kind of bad blood that is between these two guys.
Gotcha. And then one thing that we kind of talked to Demetrius Johnson about yesterday as well was just how fun one championship makes things. They think outside the box. The trade was something that we never expected to hear. It was something that we kind of talked about back in the day. What if MMA organizations did this? Do you ever think that could ever come up ever again, another trade? Do you think that's something that eventually, maybe years down the road, maybe not the norm, but can happen from time to time?
I think so. Who knows? Yeah, I'll say this. I was asked, I mean, I remember my career when I was thinking about MMA. Keep in mind, I got into mixed martial arts, and like I told my dad that I wanted to quit my job in 2002 to become a professional mixed martial arts athlete. And my father looked at me like I was stupid, because at the time, like, the sport wasn't even developed. So the idea of actually earning a spot in the top show of the world was insanely improbable. But on top of that, it's like, what kind of living are you going to earn doing these things? And so as MMA grew, like, this becoming a mainstream household name was just kind of like, I'm like, nah, that'll never happen. And then I slowly watched it happen during my career with the Ultimate Fighter, and then in my career, like me winning the title and becoming a coach at that point in time, like the UFC and MMA in general just became this kind of household thing. And so, you know, when I'm asked about these questions, like, where's the ceiling on this thing? I'm like, I don't doubt at this point in time. It can be, we could see a day 10 years from now where organizations are just trading athletes like football teams are from one to the next.
I definitely would like to see it. I think sometimes a fighter can run his or her course, and if you lose twice to a champion, maybe, you know, it's hard to get that third one, or maybe you run into a contract situation. Yeah, and so something else can open up, and, you know, obviously a promotion's invested in the fighter, but if you can execute a trade, why not? I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can say this right. Seo Ham is going to fight Denise Zambangoa. I'm really anxious to see this one. We had Zambangoa once on. She thought she was going to get all the way to the finals, and I believe she was one of the ones that thought, boy, Angela Lee's kind of dodging a bullet here. We're all, you know, mixing it up in this Grand Prix. But, of course, Angela was, you know, becoming a mother. So, anyway, getting to know her, she speaks great English, and I just thought, wow, you have some charisma. I think you could be the next star out of the Philippines. Is this kind of like maybe a possible number one contender fight?
I think so. Actually, I got to say this properly, because I wasn't surprised by Zamboanga's performance in the Grand Prix, but she definitely put on a good show. With that being said, Seo Ham was my pick prior to the GP starting to win the whole thing. Like I was like, this is the dark horse pick that people are kind of overlooking. And the match between those two, I mean, if you go back and watch their first match, because for the backstory for the fans is Seo Ham and Denise Zamboanga, they fought in the first Grand Prix, and it was a split decision, maybe a little bit of controversy to it. A lot of the Filipinos felt like Denise won that match, and I'm sure the Koreans felt that Seo won on her side. But anyway, razor close decision, either way that you see it. Like one of those things, it was really tight fight. But it ended up that Denise was eliminated from the tournament at that point, and then Seo had injured her hand, perhaps, I think her left hand maybe, and so she had to pull out of the tournament. So it's kind of unfinished business for both of these girls, and I think that this could possibly be a potential like contender spot for the next person in line to, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what happens, obviously, with Stamp and Angela, because if Stamp ends up winning this match and how the fight unfolds, there could be, you know, rematch or whatever. But either way, I think Denise and Seo Ham are kind of poised for that next number one contender position.
And let's transition into the main event, and let's talk about Stamp Fairtex challenging Angela Lee. Angela Lee, you know, has been doing this really her whole life, as has Stamp Fairtex. But I believe Angela Lee's probably been more well-rounded for more of her life, possibly, than Stamp Fairtex. But you've also lived overseas. Tell me, how long do you think a lot of the Muay Thai fighters who have seen MMA blow up concentrate on Muay Thai, but also maybe go out there and hit some mitts or do some, you know, a little bit of wrestling or whatever there is, because they know that there's an eventual transition or a dip in the toe into our sport?
Yeah, I think especially now when you're looking at this modern era of Muay Thai athletes, particularly the Muay Thai athletes from Thailand, they're seeing that beyond fighting Thai, that there is a career elsewhere. And, you know, fighting on a global stage for an organization like One Championship is, you're completely in two financially different stratospheres as opposed to competing just in Muay Thai in Thailand. But you look at a girl like Stamp. I'm the one that recruited Stamp, actually. I found her. She came through the One Warrior Series show that I was doing. And when she was at the tryouts, I was actually watching somebody try out, and 2 people try out on the mats. And all of a sudden I hear these just cannon, like it was her shin hitting the pads and just sounded like cannons. I just remember looking to the side like, who is that? And it's this tiny little girl just hammering these pads away. And I immediately knew just by watching her kick. I hadn't even seen the rest of her game. I'm like, this girl has talent. Like, she's legit. She'd been fighting since the age of 6 years old. And for the American fans over here that aren't familiar with Muay Thai, like parents in Thailand will put their children in competitive Muay Thai at a young age, just simply to alleviate household bills. Like it's a potential earner for them, pulling in money each month for fights. So, there's footage of Stamp. There was a documentary done on her called Buffalo Girls. At the age of 6, like, she was just competing full-on competition, Muay Thai, full contact. And so, like Angela, both of these girls have been in combative sports for a long time. I personally think, like, just having traveled the world and seen, I think Muay Thai athletes are some of the best athletes suited for transitioning from a purist martial art into MMA. And I say this particularly because the sport of Muay Thai has like sweeps and dumps, and they're really, really adept at the clinch work and defending takedowns as well, because they practice these techniques with like leg catches and getting their leg caught and avoiding, having their bottom leg swept out from underneath them or kicked, or just, being drugged down in the clinch or whatever. And so they have this kind of natural propensity towards takedown defense to begin with. Finding Stamp, when I recruited her at the time, she was very green on her ground game. But I watched her develop as she was coming through one championship. And the interesting thing about her is that, if I was her coach, like, I'd probably get on her after the matches, because she's so excited about the development of her MMA game that I've seen her at times attempt to do things in a match that are probably higher risk than I would like if I was her coach. But all that is to say that it culminated with her in the finals in the Grand Prix against Ritu Fogat. And she takes one of the best wrestlers that we have in one championship, in Ritu, who's known for just smashing people, and ends up armbarring this girl. And so when you're able to do that over a couple-year period, it shows what kind of learning curve you have for martial arts. So with Angela having had the time in, like, I don't, in no way, shape, or form do I think that Stamp is going to submit Angela by any stretch of the imagination. But I think the big X factor on this, pun I intended, I guess, since this is 1X, is what's Angela been doing the last couple of years, right? Are her priorities still being champion of the world, or are her priorities now taking care of a baby? Are those two things mutually exclusive? I don't know. I'm not a mom. I've never had a kid. I never will. So it's like, well, what Angela are we going to see coming up on 1X here? And that makes for an interesting matchup. Obviously, Stamp has the advantage with her striking, and Angela has the advantage with her well-roundedness in the entire game. So it's going to be interesting to see how this match unfolds.
I can't wait for it. And then we can't leave without at least touching on Adriana Moraes versus Yuya Wakamatsu. Moraes is going to be defending his title, and of course, that huge win over DJ just really, really changed his career. I'm sure his confidence. But what's that first title defense like?
This isn't Adriano's first title defense.
I apologize. Okay.
Yeah, it's his first title defense since the DJ match. But keep in mind, Adriano has been a long reigning champion for us, and with the American fans, the win over DJ kind of put him on the map. But for those of us that have been overseas and working at one or whatever, fans of one, they know, like, man, Adriano is a force to be reckoned with. And I knew that was a very tricky matchup for DJ, because Adriano is like, he has good hands as well. Like, he's a very well-rounded athlete like DJ is, but he's tall and he's long and he has a reach, and that makes things difficult, because DJ had to spend time closing the distance and having to almost like overcompensate with closing on that distance, and that's kind of what set the stage for him getting kneed at the end of that match. But all that to say, like, Yuya Wakamatsu, what people don't know about him is that he actually faced DJ, and that's his only loss in his last I don't know, like 9 or 10 matches or whatever. I can't remember, but he faced DJ in the Grand Prix that we had and gave DJ everything that he could handle. Like Yuya's a force to be reckoned with. So both of these guys, Adriana and Yuya Wakamatsu, they're high-paced athletes, and I mean, I look for this from bell to bell to just be action-packed from top to bottom, man.
Yeah, you are correct. He has been defending for a long time. I had meant like after beating DJ, what will he be like? I got to imagine you just take another step, knowing that, hey, like, because I guess there's so much of a stigma of, well, could the UFC house the best fighters, or do we have some of them? And so when you have an opportunity to cross and have them face each other, I think it does a lot for a lot of these fighters. I've seen it with Eddie Alvarez, Michael Chandler, the guys that came over from WEC back in the day, even Strikeforce. It was always, can we compete? And that question's been answered for many years, but from one championship, I hadn't seen too much of a mixture of that. Actually, Askren went down there and he beat Robbie Lawler, and I think for him it was tremendous. I don't know if he'll ever admit it because he's so cocky and he's an NCAA god, but he was a champ at Bellator, a champ at one championship, and he was getting tested in both places. I remember Papa was pretty athletic for him, and I remember at Bellator a few of the guys, Jay Haran, I think, took him to a 5th round, and that was tough. But when he beat Lawler, you could just see, like, I don't know, like, okay, I'm just as good as anyone. I think Adriana Moraes has to be feeling the same thing after that big fight last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy like Adriana Moraes would probably fly under the radar slightly because, like I said, until he beat DJ, there's now a lot of people are like, whoa, who's this guy? Yeah. And so, but like I said, those of us that are in the organization have known for years that he's a tough cat.
Rich, I lied. I do have one more thing I've always wanted to ask you. What makes the Lee so special, the Lee family, all of them? Is there one ingredient that they all share?
I don't think it's just one ingredient. Remember the Fab Five from Michigan? I'm showing my age here.
Yeah. Juwan Howard, Chris Webber.
Right. Like, so, you have like some stars on the team, but really like it was the dynamic of the team that really made that team the team. And I think that that's what ends up with the Lees, right? There's this real family unit. And I mean, it's like, I've seen, I don't know, Christian come out to Angela's corner a few fights before he's going to fight, or vice versa. I mean, on the same card, or they're helping each other warm up. And they're just been raised as a unit. And their dad, like Ken, this guy has basically, like, I say this jokingly but serious at the same time, he has genetically engineered this entire family to be martial artists growing up. Like, they just, from day one, like, you were going to be a champion, and that's essentially the mindset that these kids have grown up with. And that's what I think is interesting about when you compare and contrast Angela and Stamp, for example. Like, they are similar in ways that both of these kids from a young age, like even Stamp was probably not necessarily groomed for that, because initially it started off as like, hey, you're contributing to the household income on a monthly basis, but it just kept developing in that. And eventually it was like a belt strapped around her waist was inevitable at some point in time as well. So these two girls, before they even knew it, since like, I don't know, 1995, they'd probably been on a collision course for each other.
Yeah. And I love that pool, man, the Fab Five. I was going to name off the rest and cut you off. I was going to call a timeout, but we ran out of timeouts.
Oh, well, go ahead. You can name off the rest because I can't remember the entire team anyway. I'm an Ohio guy, right? So, we're both.
It was kind of a joke because do you remember when Chris Webber in the national championship called timeout and they ran out of timeouts?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So I was sneaking in a pun there. I didn't know if you guys would catch that. Did you catch that, Chris?
Yeah.
And I usually pride myself on intelligent humor, and I was not smart enough to pick that one up.
Hey, you're still Rich Franklin, for crying out loud. You're going to work out for the second time today. I can't believe that. I haven't even worked out for the second time this month.
Yeah.
And today's the 20. That's so sad. The 23rd. Anyway, thank you so much for your time as always. We always have a blast with you. Cannot wait for 1X from top to bottom from 10 p.m. Pacific Friday. I'm going all the way to Saturday morning, man. I'm just going to brew the coffee, and there's a lot of great matchups. Grappling, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA, title fights. It's incredible.
Oh, it's gonna be a good time. I'm in the States for this one, and this is one show that I'm really regretting not having my cage side seat for. Yeah.
Well, it's not too late to hustle down there, man. Still got a few days, but anyway, thanks again, Rich. Take care, Ace.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.